on Zoom. Okay, here we go. And we have a couple of folks coming in.
Oh, how exciting. Let's see who's all here.
Party. There's Margaret. Hi, Margaret. And then this next person.
Patricia.
Yeah, Christopher, Shelley. We have a nice group. And
look at them all filling up.
Oh
my God, Miranda Gonzalez. There is a Brian Miranda watching.
I mean, my name is a last name, popular in the Caribbean. So I always tell people I have two last names. Yes, because it's Miranda Gonzalez. They're super popular.
Are you related to
Miranda?
Miranda?
No, I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm Black and Mexican. So
that actually is Puerto Rican. It's yeah. It's true. I am
with you.
Mexican. So, yeah. Awesome. Welcome.
Welcome. All right. Well, I'm so interested to hear this conversation. I'm excited. So welcome to those of you who have joined us. My name is Rachel Patterson. I am the director of Acting Studio Chicago. And this is the 13th, lucky 13, the 13th webinar that we've done in this series since April. And I'm delighted. We have talked to a lot of very interesting and gracious industry professionals. And I think we've been learning a lot, both about the business and about the culture and about what's important and about change that is happening and needs to happen or has needed to have happen for a long time. And that's part of what Esti is going to be talking about with Miranda today. So this is Esteban Andreas Cruz, who has been hosting several webinars for us. Thank you, Esti. And their guest this evening is Miranda Gonzalez. I'm really delighted that you are here. Thank you. I know you're a busy person, so I really appreciate this time. And Miranda is the artistic director of Urban Theater Chicago and a founding ensemble member of Teatro Luna, and has devised and developed plays for more than 20 years. So she knows her stuff, and I'm just delighted to listen to this conversation. So thank you both, and take it away. I'm gonna make you a host and give you all the power, Esti.
Woo. Thank you so much. Ooh, I feel it.
I know, can you feel the power that's coming? Zing.
Zoom.
Whoa. You are
well,
have all the power.
Listen, thank you so much, Rachel. We'll see you soon. And thank you everyone out there. This is part of this little series within our webinars that we're doing called The Arts with Esti. And it was imperative to me to want to have conversations with artists and institutions that have been doing the work and leading the conversation in what the future of theater is. And I can go on and on and on about Miss Miranda Gonzalez because she's incredible, and it's a huge gift to have her here. But I'm gonna let the woman speak for herself to tell us about what she is and her vision and her work, and just to give us a little bit of insight about what we are in store for. So Miranda, please take us on a journey.
Well, I have no idea what you all are in store for because Esti literally was like, hey, join my call. See you soon. And that's how that went. And I was like, well, all right, I guess I'm going to be there for my friend. Like they mentioned, I am the producing artistic director over at Urban Theater Company and founding ensemble member with Teatro Luna, that was Chicago's only all-Latina theater company for over a decade. They are now out on the West Coast with Teatro Luna West. and being led by Alex Smeda. I also work within the DE&I space, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion, for corporate spaces, really supporting content design, project management, and facilitation around policies, communications. I have to go through the entire list. Policies, communications, and processes, and making sure that those processes are inclusive and fair of everyone within those orgs. So that's pretty much what I do. I am also a playwright and a director. I have not performed on stage in a very long time. I started out in performance back in a very long time ago, and in that's all I'm saying. And I have since then found a lot more satisfaction and pleasure in holding space for other performers to do their thing. I find that a lot more, I don't know what the word would be right now, but I just love it. It's my favorite thing to do. So yeah, that's pretty much all about me. Where are we taking this conversation, Esty? Where is this conversation even going? I mean, I wonder.
So many places. I can't even tell you. It's so exciting. I will say also to you know, toot your horn a little bit. I actually got to see you directed Ashes of Light, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And this production at Urban Theater Company, I got to watch before streaming plays was such a COVID thing. When I was in Puerto Rico in 2018. And it was so cool to be on the island right after Hurricane Maria and watching this play about Puerto Rican culture at this theater company that is rooted in the Puerto Rican community of Humboldt Park, right there on Division. And it made me, you know, for lack of a better word, proud. It made me super proud to see this work being done and with a group of people who was always dedicated to this specific community. And I know that right now, part of the reckoning that we're feeling in this country with George Floyd, after the backdrop of the trauma of a global pandemic, now we're feeling the ripples of that through George Floyd in our industry in theater. And when we've seen it, I mean, oh my God, I have seen you on so many panels.
Yes.
Can't even count. I mean, like, seriously. I actually, it calls to mind one that I saw you in, I want to say, God, what was it? Was it 2017, 20, something around then?
Oh, the Actors Equity panel.
That's right. It was at the Actors Equity. And I just want to just open up with this because I thought it was a really interesting way, because we've been seeing this now for the past 10, 15 years, people being like, equality, diversity, inclusion, equality, diversity, inclusion. And if companies, PWIs, predominantly white institutions, did not have this in their verbiage, they would not get the kind of funding that they do if they didn't have some kind of thrust toward these initiatives. And so people kept demanding change, and this is what they would do. They would have panels, they would have discussions, they would have town halls. And at this particular one, which was a national series of panel town hall things, they invited membership. I'm a member of Actors Equity, and they had a panel of a diverse group of people, I guess. And the first question at this, and it was an admission to change Equity's stance on equality, diversity, inclusion within a 3-year span or a 5-year span. And by 2020, it was like, we have 2020 vision. So that in 2020, we would be way more diverse, way more inclusive, and way more equitable. And the first question that they pulled from membership, and this question, by the way, was vetted by a person of color who was moderating the discussion. And the first question was, do you feel like the pendulum has swung too far?
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
So I would like to open up this discussion with that very same question.
Oh, my goodness. I just want to let everyone know I have no idea what questions are coming up. So whatever comes out of my mouth comes out. And I hope you all stay entertained. I think the majority of folks here are performers and actors. So I'm sure you'll love my yes and being able to do that. Has the pendulum swung too far? What does that even mean? Too far for what? Too far how? Too far where? In what way? I mean, I find it very interesting when people have that mentality of, is this too much? Is this too far? I don't think that's the question, right? Like, I think the issue is, are people still feeling like they are not being centered in stories? That's the question, right? Back then, I had to share a panel with, I'm on a panel with a bunch of people, whom of which some I knew, but a lot I didn't. Some of them were artistic directors in predominantly white institutions. Some of them were artists who swim in predominantly white institutional spaces, right? And a lot of what I say, I'm a very honest and authentic person. So when you are among a panel like that and you are the only one in the space who has done intentional decolonization of work, it is very different, right? Because my first reaction is, why is this panel even happening? I mean, so many of us are doing this work, right? Like, so many of us are. The issue is who is doing it and who is not, and what you continuously see within the theater world is that folks automatically go to large institutions and predominantly large institutions and that are predominantly white and compare everything that they do to what that institution does and equate it to success. You know, am I being validated? Am I, is this work quality, right? So when that person asked, do you think the pendulum swung too far? I mean, I don't even know how it would swing too far when a lot of the funders, right, because I have to deal with funder conversations, they're still funding predominantly white institutions an exorbitant amount of money because they do it based off of percentage of budget to these spaces. And those spaces have their 1 to 2 people of color shows. You know, I don't want to call that or say that it's tokenism, right? Because it reads as tokenism, but it is actually extremely intentional, you know? And tokenism for me, and I say this for me, means that it is intentional to say that we have one person who is doing this play that's of color. But in predominantly white spaces, what has happened is they will have an entire team, right? So it doesn't represent a tokenism perspective. And I will never forget this. I will never, ever forget this photo. But a wonderful friend of mine who's an amazing director who I love and respect very much, Lillian Brown, she did The Mean Girls, right? There was at the Goodman, and there was a photo. And in the photo, everyone at the table was Black. And the Goodman put this photo out, and they were like, oh, yes, look, you know, Blackness here. And everyone standing in the background was white. I'm not kidding, right? And I looked at the photo and I said, is this performative, right? Because when we think of predominantly white institutions, even if they have an entirely Black cast, predominantly white institutions don't necessarily have the proper support to make that entirely Black cast or ensemble or team feel safe in the spaces that they play in, right? So right away, I'm like, I wonder what that looked like. I wonder what did that feel? What did that power paradigm feel like, right? Because everyone in the background is an administrative person. And I think what a lot of actors who don't do administrative work in theater realize is that those really are the people who are pulling the strings, right?
Right.
They really are the ones saying, who are we going to hire? How are we going to get them together? Who's a part of this team? Who is not a part of this team? They're also the ones who are saying, oh, darn, who do I know? Who is my network? Who's within my sphere that I can call up to say, hey, do you want to be a part of this, a part of this project? So they are also the ones who wrote the grants. They're also the ones who reached out. They're also, right? So that is a power dynamic that a lot of folks don't realize really, really creates the experience that you as an actor get in the room. Everyone is connected. Everyone's connected. So if you have a producer who decided to only apply to a couple of grants or decided on whatever X budget, then they bring in certain designers and they want it to be of color. However, they're like, well, will this person work for this amount, right? In negotiation, like, this is what the stipend is. Will you do this? Or this is what the pay is per week in an equity stage, or this is what the tier we're paying you at, right? A lot of that is also within that power of knowing what the difference is between tiers and different people who are not of color, right? So like, if someone in that production is not having a great experience because a producer or a board member or whomever came to a run and treated them unfairly or whatnot, then that space is no longer safe to play in, even though all of us will give that up, right? We'll go to a large institution and say, I want to be validated. So then therefore, if I work here, this looks great on my resume and I'm just going to make it big. And we find out, right? Like, no, we don't make it big. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and at the time when I was younger, and when I was a lot younger, I wanted to make it big too. Like, I wanted to be on every single stage that you can think of, and I just wanted to be that person. But time and time again, when I would be a part of rooms that were not predominantly or not inclusive, right? Or they were predominantly white, really. I would feel so exhausted. You know, I was exhausted. I'm like, why am I so tired? I don't feel like myself in this space. I don't feel that I could just be in this space. I feel like disconnected to the other team players. You know, some people walk in, don't even say hi, and then I have to go in and do it, you know, and do a scene with them. And so it was, I started really saying to myself, how can I align better with what I believe in, where I feel good, right? So it started there. So when people ask questions like that one, like, did the pendulum swing too far? That tells me that that person was white. I'm right, because if you're of color, you're not asking that question.
Because you
that
know.
Question does, yeah, you're like, what do you mean? I only had 3 jobs. You know what I mean? Like this whole year.
Yeah, and I thought to the moderator who presented the question, I was like, because she's female, and I was like, wait a minute. So are you saying that you get paid more than a man at the same job that you do? Like, has it swung that far? Is that what you're saying? Because no, come on, no. Let's be real.
It was such a crazy, it was so nuts. I just found people to be really out of touch, which brings me to my next point, is that those who are within these power dynamics or power structures are not doing the work themselves.
Yeah.
So you're bringing in your unconscious bias, right? Like, that's just how it is. And a lot of the work that I do when I facilitate conversations or when I work on content that deals with that talks about the reality of your individual bias coming into play and how much of it is unconscious and how much of it is and how that plays out scientifically. Like, it is a scientific fact. And a lot of the times, you know, the look on people's faces is like, I'm not, like, yeah, exactly. What? You know, this can't be. I love everybody. I am a global citizen. You know, whenever anybody says a global citizen, I'm like, well, that's someone not wanting to recognize their own unconscious bias. You know, it's true. It's true. As soon as that happens, I'm like, okay. And not that it's a judgment. It's just like, okay, there's more work, right? Because we put on a lot of justifications in order for us to be right. Or like, oh, no, I don't discriminate towards anybody, or I don't do that, or, you know.
Yeah.
So it's been that, you know, that I'm happy you brought that up, because I don't stop thinking about that panel.
Yeah.
And the reason I don't stop thinking about it is because at that time, it was my first time coming out as, you know, UTC's new artistic director. And I didn't think that everyone in that room was really ready for the truth that I had to call in at the
Oh, girl, no, they
you
were
know,
not.
they
And I
were
have to
not.
say, between you and Lydia Diamond, y'all kept me from like turning the table over and just like, you know, smearing the walls with feces because I was so angry at what was happening. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. The things that they were asserting about, like, well, if people of color would just train more.
Oh yes, it was so racist.
Yeah, it was incredibly racist, and I couldn't believe that it was being supported by our union. But you said a lot of really great things that we can go off into a lot of different directions. But I wanted to reflect on the biases that people have, the inherent biases that people have coming in, and a lot of this is focused on you know, predominantly white institutions and these white players. But I just want to call into account my own personal experience as a person who has ascended within these colonial institutions and predominantly white institutions, and has lived that life where I've had success and done things and worked, you know, off Broadway and all around, and it's been really great. And I think that part of what the inheritance is of living in a racist society is we also inherit a colonial bias as being a colonized people as well. And I was doing this thing that I had to break myself from, which was every room that I would get into, I would be so grateful to be there. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. Oh my God, I'm so grateful to be here. Oh my God, thank you. So much, to the point that I was almost apologizing for being in the space. So much so that I was like, you know, leaning into the narrative of like, thank you so much for taking this brown little cross-eyed faggot from the West Side and putting them in your nice white people play, you know? So I was selling into that idea of the white savior narrative. And it was just something that was part of like what I was trained to think was the only way possible to achieve success. And it took a lot of healing, therapy, and success to teach me that, you know, and working with Lab and with other theaters that taught me about my own brilliance, and that I could step into it and be like, nah, I deserve to be here. And beyond that, I am a major contributor to the art that is being created in this room.
Mm-hmm.
So for artists that are not working in these PWIs, or artists that are working in these PWIs, how can we fast track that healing and that unlearning of, you know, just to get to that place of like, you are beautiful, you deserve this, and you are enough. That's what I would like to share with.
You know, it's like a breakup, right? Like, think about all the grievances you go through when you break up with someone. And I remember breaking up, and I remember I was, you know, in a play, I was acting, and one of my fellow actors was like, Miranda, I wish I could tell you there's a pill, but there's not a pill that you could take to just make this go away. You just have to go through it. And I didn't want to accept that as an answer, you know, and a lot of when I speak on panels about this particular subject, I think I wish there was something, because then right at the snap of a finger, everybody would just learn to look at each other in this way that of value, you know, and that's just not so. Like, there isn't a fast tracking. There is a start and a journey, you know, and so what's happening, I feel, is a lot of folks are using a lot of this language or learning it right through the Googles, or viéndolo en el face, as they say in Mexico, en el face, el
In their
Facebook,
face.
en el face, right? And so they're looking at these words, and they're using the language, and they're doing a really great job of like, that institution is being inappropriate, or that person is being inappropriate, but they're not working from within. Because everyone has a story where you could look at another artist and say, but you totally worked on that play. I remember that play that you worked on. That was not, you know what I mean? That was not upholding, or it was upholding white supremacy, and it was not dismantling anything.
Right.
Or I see the choices you make through your artistry to put yourself in predominantly white spaces and hide behind the idea of disrupting a system, right? And that is that is where I say the work is from within. Because when you have a conversation with someone who has done the work inside, they will automatically give you the background of relatedness, right? Like, I really wanted to be XYZ, or I worked in this space and I know that it may have looked at this way, or I may have upheld XYZ, and this is what I've learned. Yeah. It's the language is structured so differently, so if I had to tell people, and I'm going to apologize now because I hear my kids running around. I have 3 of them. And I'm like, they are having a ball right now. Their dad is out there, pero quién sabe. I don't know what is going on. I don't know what is happening, but I'm just like hearing this chasing. And I'm like, people are probably on here like, what is going on in the background? But anyway, so I'm going to do that. But it for me, a lot of folks, it's like going to therapy, right? Like, you have that friend that went through trauma. Yeah. And they're like, I don't need therapy. I don't need, what do you mean I have you? Or I have my mom, or I have so-and-so, or I have, it's literally that. It's like, and those of us who have gone through therapy are like, oh, honey, that person has not gone through therapy, I mean, all that, they wouldn't have gone through all that, and I just want to say, like, authenticity comes from within. Like, you can automatically spot who is the person who is struggling or having that internal conflict because they haven't worked it out yet, and I think that us as human beings have to stop thinking that we can lie to people, by covering up with language. Like, we can just, it's like, it doesn't matter. I can see it. Like, everyone can see, everyone who is not you can see it. But you're like, oh, no. I don't need it. Yeah, I broke up with him, but I don't love him. I don't love him. And your friends are like, girl, you totally are still in love. And that's the relationship that people have. Right. And that's the relationship people have to white supremacy. Like, they love it. Like, it's like, what do you mean? I don't do that. No, I mean, I don't want to. And then they're like on you about, like, I can't believe you were 5 minutes late, right? That's a characteristic of white supremacy, urgency, right? That urgency of, like, you were 5 minutes late. Oh, I can't believe it. What are they going to do? What is this person, and it's like, calm down. You have no idea what this person is walking in from. But we automatically assume, right, that, and that's something that I make sure to not do in my rehearsal spaces. I don't care. Like, I don't tell my actors what time in my mind I'm thinking of starting, right? I don't do that, because then people will be like, oh, she's not thinking about starting till this time anyway, so I'm going to be even later, right? That may happen, that may not happen, whatnot, just psychologically. But a lot of the times, I just I don't want my actors to walk into a room feeling the pressure of lateness.
Yeah.
Right? It's so unfair. Like, people have other jobs. Even if you're in an equity house, do you know how many of my friends were equity that were rehearsing through the day, that were trying to figure out how in the heck they were going to, what was their next job, or how they're going to pay for their actors' equity insurance so they're bartending at night, or how, right? No one is just, like, very, very minimal people are on Broadway or are making that kind of living that they can truly support themselves in every sense of the word. and
Very
have a retirement fund. Do you know what I mean?
Amen. Amen.
You know, so,
Yeah.
but yeah, so as far as the fast pill, maybe that I wish. There's not, you know, I mean,
There's
I had
not.
to go through it. Like, I had to go through it.
Yeah.
Right? I'm Black and Mexican. I had to deal with anti-Blackness in Latinx community since I was a child.
Oh my God.
Right? Like, I had to deal with that. I had to deal with you know, going into film. You know, I became union SAG-AFTRA when I was 15 years old, and they did not know what to do with me. They were like, she doesn't look that Black, and she doesn't look Latina at all. Like, they were just like, she doesn't look that Black. Like, that literally was what people would say. Like, I didn't present Black, and I'm just like, I'm so confused. Like, it was the you know, the mind Olympics that went through my mind, the identity that I just felt neither here nor there in a constant way, even though, like, the Black community never questioned my Blackness.
Right.
You know, I mean, I had one white Latina tell me that another Black artistic director questioned my Blackness. And I was like, I don't know about that. And I, you know, I brought it up, and he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, okay,
Good.
all right.
Good.
You know, so sometimes there's like dealing with all of that in these spaces. I too had to go through loving myself the way I was, and also not adhering to the idea of what makes a great leader in these spaces. You know, like, there's a lot of deconstruction that had to happen in so many different ways. And like, people, I'm a producing artistic director, and I did not go to a conservatory. Right. I started acting when I was 14 years old in commercial acting. Then from there, I accidentally got in a play at 18. And it was the Oedipus Antigone bloodline with 13th Tribe at the time. There was 23 people. It was colorblind casting, right? Because back then, that's what they called it, right? Colorblind casting.
We need to unpack that one.
Exactly. So, so they said that, and I went and I got on, and I just didn't resonate with the story. And then, lo and behold, I ran into Tanya Saracho at an audition to be a Cuban prostitute, because back then that's all it was, right?
Like we all have been.
Yes, like you were either a prostitute, a maid, or a gangbanger. I mean, you know, I know. I've seen you gangbang sometimes on stage. I remember those days. You know, that's how long we've been in this industry.
Yeah.
So it was definitely, you know, going through that, and then finding TL, and us not knowing what we were going to do, and literally saying to each other in a room, like, what are we going to do? Shakespeare is all women. And then everyone was like, what do we want to do? Like, how does that resonate? It doesn't resonate, you know? And it was through journaling that we finally decided to put up our own stories and do autobiographical work.
Beautiful.
And original. It was all original. And we had no idea that was going to, I had no idea that was the start of me decolonizing theater. I had none, you know? And I also was like, well, I don't want to go to the acting school. You know, I was at DePaul at the time, and I'm like, I don't want to go to the acting school. So I went to the College of Commerce, and I graduated with a business degree. So a lot of times, like, my path does not equate to a lot of artists that do go to conservatories where they have, you know, where the pedagogy there is predominantly white as it is, right? And this idea of the actor as neutral and what that looks like. And I had to, because I had already been experienced, you know, I had already had all of this experience by the time I graduated college. And when I decided to become a director, I just undid all of that. Like, I was like, I like would look at, you know, a book or the idea, or, you know, Anne Bogart, anything Anne Bogart did. And I was like, nah, no me gusta esto. No, I'm not going to do that. No, that doesn't make sense. Like, I would just, you know, and then really come from a space of healing, you know, and I always joke, you know, in my rehearsal rooms, I always know by week 3 or 4, someone will have a breakdown. And
Yeah.
the breakdown will not be a breakdown that people think. The breakdown typically is a breakdown of, oh my God, I have not been myself. This is so strange for you to ask me to be a Latinx person or a Black Latinx person or a Black, like, on stage. I have stripped myself of all of that, you know? And I'm like, well, not here. You know what I mean? Like, you have to bring, this is your story. This is your story. This does represent you, you know? And when you talk about Ashes of Light, that was actually a Dominican story and it was written by Marco Antonio Rodriguez, which I loved. I loved directing that piece. And it was dealing, you know, having the actors strip away, you know, things that they had learned that they were like, but I was told this is a tool, you know? And you're like, yes, but for who? Who is this tool for? You know, because it's not, who is it for? Who is it meant for?
Right.
You know? And so it really, for me, I had no clue of how impactful approaching the work from that perspective would be, and how it would change my plays that I directed. Like I really did. I was like, well, let's take all of that out. And then all of a sudden it's like this beautifully done ensemble piece where they have leaned into one another in this trusting way. And it feels like a true ensemble, you know, and to see them exchange the love. And I have to tell you, the majority of people I've directed or groups I've directed still keep in contact. They become best friends. They, you know, all of a sudden it's like they're, you know, friends for life, BFF for life, as we say, you know, and that's what I love seeing. That for me is like, oh, I can die happy. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like connection. It's all about connection.
Mi gente, oh my God, Miranda, you are such an inspiration. And the things that you're talking about, everything that you're saying and everything that you're alluding to is part of us existing as people of color, especially intersectional people, you know, having a disability, you know, being cross-eyed since I was born and blind, and being queer, and even the conflict between being Mexican and Puerto Rican. Believe it or not, there's a lot of tension. You know, I learned that through this journey, what is going to get me through, and not just to be a great artist, but for survival, is that healing that you keep going back to. And the thing that neither one of us has mentioned is the trauma that exists just by your very being of being a queer person, of being a woman, of being Black or being Latino in this country. You already, out the gate, walking through this world, you are constantly reminded of your existence, and you're constantly having to defend it. As a queer person, my right to be is something that I just, it's exhausting. That's the word that you used, was that it's exhausting. And so back to these PWIs, and that feeling of being exhausted is because not only are we just trying to do the work and exist as an artist, but we're also like burning on all cylinders, trying to, like, you know, overcome each of these microaggressions and these little things. And so the thing that you mentioned about like training in theater, I went to school for rhetoric. I studied creative writing, nonfiction writing, creative nonfiction, prose poetry, and poems. And I never wanted to study theater because I never looked at it as a real discipline. I studied dance. I did not. I was like, you know, theater, you can either do it or you can't. You can't teach somebody how to act. They either know how to not bullshit, or they look like they're full of shit. Those are the only two options of acting I've ever seen on stage.
I would agree with you 100%, except from a director's perspective. Some people fall in love with those who can be consistent. You know?
Yeah, there you go. There you go. But as far as working in these institutions, in these schools, when I would come into plays then in my early career, not only the environment, but sometimes the representations that we would see on stage felt like I had to give up a little bit of my soul. And it felt like what I was stepping into was this thing where as long as we said chancla or tortilla and rolled our R's, then we could satisfy the audience's demand for leaving the theater and having the conversation on the way home of, oh my God, I saw all these Latinos on stage and I didn't feel threatened at all. And I felt like that's a lot of my earlier part of my career in predominantly white institutions, was to satisfy that role, which is to please and appease white guilt and the white consciousness for what my role was in their world. And
Yeah,
that's a lot of times, yeah. What is it called?
It's called protectionism.
Protectionism. I didn't even know that was a word, but I felt it. I felt it. So then I found, playwrights like Stephen Edley Girgis, where his world, he was writing for these Black and brown bodies and speaking to them in a way that I didn't feel like I had to sacrifice anything of myself. Well, not in the way that was untrue. It definitely, all of his plays are a sacrifice because of the honesty that you have to bring. And I feel personally that it's not acting in his plays that I do, but just being and just living. And so my question to you is, within these plays and playwrights and certain artists that we work with, do you see that it is possible to dismantle white supremacy within predominantly white institutions? Is it at all possible?
I think it's a ruse. I think that this is my personal opinion and in my experience. When you have an institution that exists, that has processes in place, policies in place, that has been around for a very long time, and you walk in through those doors, as much as I wish every person of color who walks in through those doors can dismantle, it ends up taxing that person. Like, I've spoken to leaders across the nation who have said, I am tired. I'm the only person of color on this leadership team. And now then with Black Lives Matter and as I call it, these institutions becoming late to the game, because now they were like, uh-oh, we better put something out, because if not, people are going to think we're racist, even though we've always thought they were racist. Yeah. But they wanted to say like, oh no, we're, Black Lives Matter, and they were having people from those predominantly white institutions who were of color, even if they were not on the leadership team, like if they were like the director of education, looking over like, hey, can you take a look at this statement? Yeah. And the leaders were like, I'm the director of education. No, are you going to pay me extra? Like what is, no, and that is also a lot of the colonization, the Eurocentric perspective, the idea that, well, if I don't know something, I'm going to go to the next person who's Black, or if I don't know something, I'm going to go to the next person who's Latinx. No, do the work. There are people out there doing the work. And if, as an institution as a whole, in order to dismantle, you have to literally go in and figure out what policies you've had in the past that haven't served, right? And you have someone else take a look at it, not somebody within the organization. They already have biases and they're already myopic, right? You have to have someone else, right? Like a Xavier Rainey, right? Who does Justice Informed. You have to have someone else come in and do what they call a cultural audit, and have that cultural audit happen. Even then is not enough. Like, I think people want everything to be like, well, we took anti-racism training and, we love Black people. You know what I mean? And that's not, it just taking one training, it does not mean that you are not upholding white supremacy in other ways, right? You have to continue doing the work. It's literally an upkeep, like a chiropractor, right? Yeah. Your bones get, they get jostled a little bit, and then as you go about your day, all of a sudden they go back to where they were. It's like, it's that same kind of work, and we don't equate that work the way that we should. Like, people are like, well, I took that. That's all I needed. And you're like, no, because,
Yeah.
like I'm still watching you right now, and I'm still seeing that you're making these decisions, and I'm still, right. And there's a lot, just because you say you are not trying to be racist, right? That's what I hear. I wasn't, I was just being myself. Like I remember there was a time when with Teatro Luna, when we did a festival. I don't want to name that festival right now, because the person is still around. And you know, that a person from the organization, there was two women, said, we're gonna have you all. Look, there are Latinas. They're the Latinas, yay! And it was like, why are we even being called out that way? Why is that even happening? And a lot of that mentality still happens today in other ways, in like, well, we had that Black play last, we had this person in here who is a big time activist in our organization. Just because you put on a play that is not of the dominant narrative, that isn't white, doesn't mean you're not a racist. It doesn't. And it doesn't mean you could have a whole season curated, an entire season curated to Black work and centering Black voices. But that does not mean that you are not a racist. Because what are your processes? Like, people only look at it from the outside. It's like, no, what was it internally? I had a terrible conversation with a person who leads a department at the Theater School of DePaul, who is a white person. I had a horrible conversation with them that was extremely racist. And the company that they do work for does a whole season of curated, Black work. And I remember having this conversation with this person who, first of all, talked down to me, right? Because as a Black person, I don't know how many white people I need to spill my credentials for in order to get taken seriously. It's like, really, I have to do this again? I've been in the industry longer than you have, And so it was a horrible conversation. I'm sure that person had no idea how bad it was for me, but it was terrible. And for me, I'm thinking to myself, and this person worked on a play that won a Jeff, that was a Black show, and you just spoke to me the way you spoke to me. A lot of this is performative. So at what point do we call in our allies, right? And tell them, or our accomplices, and tell them that we can see through the performance, because it's like saying that you're not in love with the oppressor, but you're still in love with the oppressor. Do you know what I mean? And so when a lot of the times it's like, how are your rehearsal rooms being structured? How do you greet people when you walk in? How do you, like, all of that is upholding the dominant narrative, right? We were born into these conversations that existed when this country began, right? And everybody molded themselves into these conversations, not recognizing that this is cyclical. When you experience trauma, it's typically cyclical. It may exist in your generation as a different form, right? But when people talk about modern day Jim Crows, that book is essential for people understanding that there is a modern day Jim Crow that is currently happening. So they just take on different shapes or forms. So when people talk about dismantling predominantly white institutions, I'm like, okay, so it's not just going to be about training. It's also going to be about funding. So that's really what we're talking about too, right? Who's it funding? How's it funding? How's it being separated? What does that look like? And guess what? That's a board of trustees that you have to deal with, right? Those are the folks who got the money, are all the board of trustees and all of our program coordinators that are going to their board of trustees and saying, and pitching for us, right? So even if you have a program coordinator in the funding world that is a Black or brown person, they're still having to go to a predominantly white audience and say, this is why I think you should give these folks your money.
Yeah.
Like, this is why, right? So when you look at all of those layers, the dismantling is like peeling of an onion. You know, and some folks don't want to admit how many layers there are, but there are so many. So, you know, I'm happy that we're having this conversation, and at the same time, I'm not surprised because I've been watching from the sidelines, right? Of being at a theater of color, and theater of color, I've also had to tell people how I, as a person of color, define theater of color, which is founded by, led by, and for.
Yeah.
Right? I don't care if you have an audience that's predominantly Black or brown, and you're saying, oh no, we're a theater of color. Not if you're an all white, you know, like organization. Like, what does your staff look like? And then if you were founded by a white person, then what does that say? Are you playing into the white savior complex? You know, so I have a lot of these questions that I'm posing to people, because when people talk about investment, it's imperative to invest in things that were founded by, right? When you talk about Black Wall Street,
Right.
you know, like, I'm not going to put my money in this person because they are dealing with different types of diverse investments because they're my broker. You know, I would rather invest in the Black business or in the person who has an institution that is Black. You know what I mean? Like, Black owned, if that makes sense. So it's just, it is such a heavy, dense conversation, and we keep wanting to simplify it. And we can't. We can't, because we're dealing with human beings.
Amen.
You know.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just tuning in, I'm sitting here, and my guest is Miranda Gonzalez. She is the artistic director of Urban Theater Company. And if you would like to join us in celebrating this institution that I know is going to survive the pandemic, but we can always show love by making a donation at urbantheaterchicago.org.
Yeah. Yes. urbantheaterchicago.org. You haven't forgotten. I didn't know if you're, I didn't know if you're off Broadway plays or your nominations. You know what I mean?
Thank you. Because it's always important to, go back to your roots of where you came from. And I'll never forget. Actually, this little bit of trivia, I don't know if you're aware, but Ivan Vega and I went to high school together.
I know. I know you did. But that's the thing, right, Esteban? Because you and myself were born and raised in Chicago. So,
right.
And there's so few of us. There are so few of us that are in the theater industry that are born and raised from Chicago. So we have known each other. Like, well, I'm sure there's 3 people that you know that I mean, when I look at our mutual friends, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think that my friend I went to high school with is Esteban's cousin. Tina
Paciano Zayas, do you know Tina Paciano?
Of course, of course. Right.
So Tina, she grabbed me at an event when we went to college together, U of I, and it was a salsa dancing thing. And I danced salsa growing up, but I never felt confident. But she was like, you now. And just like made me dance with her. We tore it up. And she has been one of my best friends ever since. And Tina, if you are, I love you. You're amazing. And she's doing incredible work in education. Incredible work. So all of these wonderful people. Oh, so yes. So please donate urbantheaterchicago.org. And also, if you would like to hire Miranda for your institution, she does consulting work in dismantling racism. And I know that all of our institutions need that right now. So I'm looking at you. Goodman Theater. I'm looking at you. All of the big theaters out there and all the smaller ones too. We could all benefit from the wealth of knowledge that Miranda has to offer. And I'd also like to say at this time that we are, you can ask Miranda any questions or myself that you'd like to ask. And you can do so by hitting up the chat box or the Q&A box. And I don't know why people always say, just one of those. I'll see either of them. So go ahead and send us your questions either way. Before we wrap up, we'll try and get to all of them. So getting back to the topic at hand, we have so many things to say, but one of the things that you mentioned and one of the things that you're living is, and I don't feel like I'm outing you because you outed yourself earlier, but you are a mother.
I am.
Of 3.
Of 3.
And you are, not only are you a mother, but you are also an artist, you are a director, you are a writer, and you run a theater company. Wanting to talk about the future of theater and the future of theater, I'm so glad we spent time talking about their history with urban theater and with Teatro Luna, showing that these artists and these institutions can exist outside of a colonial paradigm. But now as we're going forward and we are, you know, there's this group of people that are really concerned with just white institutions and inverting the binary of who's in charge there, for those institutions that have always existed outside of a white paradigm. How can we envision the future of what we do, so that it can be accommodating to us in a lot of ways? And specifically, I wanted to talk about something that I think is really important for all theaters, white institutions and not, is childcare, and how important that is, and something that I would love to see all theaters adopt today, your childcare program for your theater, and make that a part of your benefits package. Make it a part of what you pay your artists. Do you have any thoughts on that, or how that is achieved?
Oh gosh. I have so many thoughts on that because I was one of the first in Teatro Luna to have a baby. And it wasn't until several of the other members had children later on that they called to apologize and say, I am so sorry. I expected you to just go through a 12-hour tech, you know, not being a single parent. At that time, I was a single parent. And, you know, it is very interesting to me, the world of theater, when I look at it and when I am in it. I feel a lot of the times it is not inclusive of many, many different types of human beings, you know, including mothers. And I really wish, and I do believe the only place I know that is actively making it happen is Rivendell, if I'm not mistaken. That Rivendell is saying we're going to figure out a way to have childcare here. And I know Free Street has a, you know, childcare idea. I don't know if it's changed or not, but when I directed Sushi Frito there, they were like, yeah, bring your son. However, my son is a special needs kid. So he was like, you know, 2 years old, all over the place. He's has ADHD, and, you know, his ADHD shows up in ways that look like mischief, you know, and it's not, it's just, he's highly impulsive and all of that. And so it takes a certain kind of person to be okay with him. So it you know, it's one of those moments like I where I am still shocked at the folks who are not included in a lot of these spaces, that don't allow for parents, that don't. And this is what I have to say about the theater industry as a whole, is that there is like this ageist thing that happens where it doesn't necessarily grow with you in a lot of ways. Like when I'm at TCG conferences and I hear folks who have been in the industry for 45 years and them being extremely worried about retirement, you know, and unions not thinking about retirement for them, and specifically for playwrights, and how you age out, and there's this like inherent aging out thing that happens, and being a parent is one of them, you know, because you're young, you come in, you have all the time in the world, and you have people who are, you know, perpetuating these white supremacist systems of like 12-hour, you know, tech days and all of these things. And when I went to UTC and I went with all of the knowledge that I did after my 12 years with Teatro Luna, I said, we've got to, I don't care if you bring your kid, you know. We've had children come to the space, right? We've had dogs. I literally led a whole exercise with a dog in my hand. And I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? And with the children, I am just ready to be in a space that understands that we have lives and work-life balance is real.
Yeah.
And I don't know why theaters try to exclude themselves from the same things they cannot stand about corporate America. You know, it's the same crap.
Yep.
So it's like, don't bottle it up because we're creating something. It's like one of those moments where you're like, you can't fool me. Like, I see what's happening here. So for me, a lot of it is when you look at inclusive policies, we're so good at talking about diversity and equity and wanting the two things, but the act of inclusion, right? Like, literally, you have to actively be inclusive.
Yeah.
And I think that folks are not ready for that, because they're not ready to say, oh, I didn't think that, you are a partially blind person and these lights would affect you. Like, they're not ready. They're not sitting and scoping it out. So when we talk about whether or not this new theater, new hope, the new hope would be that we would become more conscious and mindful and aware of our own selves, so we can create and learn more and be open and have everyone feel safe in the spaces that we play in. It's just, I am a big firm believer in, it starts with the individual. It starts with me. It starts with me being the one to come in. And I have to tell you, like, I have met artists that have confided in me in ways that I'm sure they wouldn't confide in another director, another artistic director at a predominantly white institution.
Yeah.
We've had to help folks through things that you could not imagine that we had to help people through, and we never even batted an eye. Like, we have literally said, hey, your car was towed, we got you, don't worry about it, we get it. Hey, you're dealing with a homelessness issue, we will call whoever it is, whoever our network is, we will work together, we will get you a place to live. Like, it's not, we are in service. We are an organization that works in service of our community, and we really literally put our artists first. Myself, Ivan, and Tony, we are not salaried. We are not. And hopefully we will get to a place where we can be, right? Because value is the other thing. I'm not saying that that's the way that people should go. No, I should be able to make a living off of running a theater organization and be able to raise 3 children off of it. I really should, and at the same time.
If somebody makes $500,000 running a theater organization somewhere, couldn't you at least be able to get food for your kids and pay rent?
Exactly. I'm with you on that. That's exactly. I was like, wait, so-and-so's making how much? Wait, what? With a whole team behind it? No. And that's the other part too, is that's why when artists are like, oh, my validation, or if you're an individual artist and you go into a large institution and you're like, oh my gosh, if I work there, it means I'm good. No, it doesn't.
No.
It doesn't mean that at all. If you really want to challenge yourself on how good, right, you would go to a storefront theater that doesn't have much, because let me tell you, that is where your artistry shines. It shines. And honestly, like, for us, we working on equitable pay. Like, we raised what we pay our designers and what our actors over the past 2 years. We've more than doubled it. And Ivan and myself and Tony are like, no, because that's what our artists deserve. And gotten in front of funders and have been like, no. Like, I shouldn't have to have my artists sacrifice in this way, and even folks who I know who are equity, like my friends who are equity, they struggle too. Like, I don't know why people think that just because you turn equity, that it's like, oh, it's more money. No, it's more bills, like, it's all of that. And so I've had a lot of my friends like tell me, like, yeah, I went equity, I'm still broke. Like, now I'm still, at least I have insurance. That's a running joke. It's like, well, I got insurance now.
Well, if you earn the weeks to get the insurance, but you have to get the job first in order to get the insurance.
To get the insurance, right. And like, it just, it's honestly a system that I would, and I'm going to be very honest, we are not going to see what that new paradigm looks like in our lifetime, but we can definitely start those conversations.
Whoa.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah. I'm saying it because there's just, how am I going to go to, even at the board level of an institution, right? So what do we do? If we're going to dismantle them, personally, you know what I would like to see? I would like to see those institutions actually get dismantled literally. Like, right? defunding, defund a little bit, spread it, spread it, spread it, to hold what needs to be held, right? So everybody has that equal pay. That is me personally, what I would like to see. You think that these folks are going to go down that fast? No.
Well, I don't know, because here's the thing. It's a reckoning now, right? It's a reckoning. And there are institutions that, you know, my friend Mika Cole.
I do.
Yeah, she loves you.
I love her. Another Shy Native. Hey.
Yeah, she was on the show last week, and we were talking about, we actually didn't get to talk about her concept of theaters as containers. Like, it's not the institution that we uphold to say that this institution, because it's been around for so many years, or because these legendary white actors had worked on this stage, or directors, or whoever. It's not about, that's not why we uphold them as great institutions. They are containers for the art that is relevant for the time. So because it has been filled with this stuff for so long, this theater downtown right off, you know, of this red line stop, you know, there's that theater that exists, but the work doesn't determine, you know, the work determines what it is. It's just a container for the work. So they're not going to be able to sustain themselves because what they're doing is not satisfactory to the world that we're living in right now. So they got to get out.
They do have to get out. But I've got to tell you, Esteban, like, I have to tell you, history, and it's in the pudding, is it'll look like they got out, but they'll just reinvent in the same fashion. That is my point. Right? Like, we cannot blind ourselves to say, if Goodman goes away, and I know I'm mentioning Goodman a lot, this is the first one that comes to my mind, right? If Goodman goes away, if Steppenwolf goes away, that doesn't mean that those leaders or artists that are running those organizations are not just going to pop up and create the same type of paradigm. How do we stop that? How do we, that's what I am talking about. It's like, you cannot, right? Because then all of a sudden it's like all of the smaller theater organizations, right? Jackalope and Sideshow and UTC, we're all going to, you know, we'll get happy. Well, I don't want to, not UTC because we're BIPOC, but, you know, they'll get happy of like, okay, great, more money our way. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they themselves are not upholding white supremacist systems and systems of oppression. And they're not just reinventing themselves to be a modern day Jim Crow, for lack of a better term right now. That's what I am saying. So that's why I'm like, this is like deep, dense work that folks on a daily basis have to ask themselves, did what I just say uphold white supremacy? Did what I just say, you know, and know what those characteristics are, in order for us to truly see what it would look like to be in a free, creative world? Because you and I both know that we have all of that going on in our heads when we walk into predominantly white institutions, and we have that imposter syndrome, and we have that, I'm so grateful, right? Or oh my gosh, I can't believe, or oh, I'm the only one. And that does not allow us the freedom of just being.
Right.
Can you imagine if we never had to worry about that? Could you imagine if I never had to worry about, like, if I just said something and people didn't question my credentials? Well, I would be so free. I'd be like, oh, thank God, this person just gets me. You know what I mean? As opposed to like, where have you worked? Where have you been? Or have you? Or what? Well, you know, or up talking. Because one of the things that we do as when the oppressed become the oppressors, that's, you know, a phrase, is that then we start up talking, you know, like somebody says something and maybe the verbiage is not where we feel, or we feel they're not communicating properly into the room. So then we reassign, so what you're saying is, and then we add larger words for that person, right? That is a sign of white supremacy.
Mira.
You know how often that happens to me in rooms where I will speak and then someone will they rephrase my words, or what she's trying to say is, right? But they won't say those words, to just say, oh, so you're saying X, 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 and mask it with like they didn't understand, but they understood fully. They just felt the way I expressed myself wasn't enough. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't. I was very clear. And there's been moments where I've literally said like, let's ask, does everyone understand what I just said? Oh, great. Everybody does. Great. There was no need for that. No need for that.
So wait, so what you're saying is.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Oh my God,
They'll just-
that's so good. Well, we've gone over time, and I'm so happy to, because you know what, time, that's a construct that I'm not a fan of, and we'll do what we feel, because that's growth. And
I'm like, hey, my kids have eaten, so I'm good. They are fed. They are happy.
My husband is waiting to eat, and he's like, come on, when you coming back down? I don't know how to cook. That's so great. Obviously, Miranda, we have like a whole world to talk about, but I think really what we should do is you and me and Mika and Carla Stillwell should all get together and form our own company and just let them know where the money should go. And then we would occupy and satisfy those communities on the west and south side and be like, that's what's up. And we determine what art is. And the beautiful thing that I think that is part of your narrative is the idea of telling your own stories that started with you at Teatro Luna and journaling and being like, my stories matter, because but back to this idea of fast tracking. And one thing that I will offer to our audience and to other artists of color and any other queer person or people with disabilities, anybody trying to get through this world that feels like it doesn't like us very much, is to the act of writing your own story, even if it's just a journal, even if you don't have the ambition to write a play out of it or write the great American novel. Writing your story helps you to retell the events in your life in a way that shows to you that they matter. And I think that's the thing that's most important. What I've taken from this conversation is that our stories matter. And when I learned that for myself, and I try and share that with the students in Berwyn, in my community at 16th Street Theater, it's to not necessarily to create the next great playwright or whatever, but to let them know that they have opinions and that they have a voice, and that voice, and not what they're memorizing, but their opinions about the things they have, that their opinions are the most important thing that they have to listen to. So, so thank you for that, you know, that enlightenment and helping me reflect on how to rephrase and upspeak my, what do you call it? Upsell?
Uptalk.
Uptalk.
Yeah, uptalk. But you know, yeah, that's you. You can speak and say it. You know, I think, who was it? Christopher Maxwell.
Yeah.
They said, stop rephrasing. I said what I said. Right. I said what I said. Right. And if somebody didn't understand, they could just ask me the question, you know, rather than like, oh. But yeah, so thank you, Esty.
Yeah. Thank
I
you,
love
my
you.
love. I love you. And let's, you know, and I know I'll see you. We'll chat some more and do some things. But thank you so much. I know you're super busy, and it's so great to have you here. And thank you for talking to everyone and people watching. Thank you for being here. And love yourself. Otra vez, Walter Chavez.
Walter, hi.
Well, we will do this. We will do this again, and perhaps on a different platform. But we're so grateful to you, and thank you for the work you do for the community and for urban theater and for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
All right, bye. We'll see you all soon.